Have you ever poured months of your life into a project, only to watch it stolen right before your eyes? I lived through that nightmare. And instead of letting it destroy my career, I turned that humiliation into my weapon. The one thing he never saw coming. I knew how to beat him at his own power game, in the very arena he'd built for himself. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't just getting even, it's taking everything they thought was untouchable. My name is Claire Donovan. And for 7 years, I'd been climbing the ladder at Westbridge Innovations, one rung at a time. At 34, I wasn't the youngest in our Chicago office, but I wasn't the oldest either. I was exactly where I should be, poised for that next big leap, the one I'd been working toward since the day I walked through those glass doors with my MBA still warm from the printer. Westbridge wasn't Google or Apple, but in the mid-tier tech world, we were players. The kind of company that made enterprise software nobody outside the industry had heard of, but that kept half of corporate America running. My official title was Strategic Development Specialist, which was corporate speak for the person who figures out what clients need before they know they need it. I lived for the work, genuinely loved it. While my friends were settling into suburban routines, complaining about their commutes, and counting down to Friday, I was pulling 12-hour days and loving every minute. My apartment in Lincoln Park was essentially a well-decorated storage unit where I slept and occasionally remembered to water my dying succulent. My real home was the 14th floor of the Westbridge building, where the city lights looked like possibilities and the hum of late-night productivity felt like progress. The thing about corporate America that nobody tells you in business school is that merit is only half the equation. The other half is politics, perception, and knowing when to make your move. I'd watched colleagues with half my skill set leapfrog past me because they played golf with the right people or because their spouse went to college with someone on the board. But I believed, God, I was naive, that eventually, solid work would speak for itself. My desk sat in the open floor plan area, what we called the pit, though management preferred collaborative workspace. From there, I could see the corner offices, their occupants hidden behind frosted glass like deities in their temples. One of those offices was supposed to be mine. The Director of Strategic Initiatives position had been dangled in front of me for 2 years now, always just one more quarter away. One more successful project from becoming reality. I'd restructured our entire client onboarding process, saving the company $2 million annually. I'd identified 3 new market segments that increased our revenue by 15%. My performance reviews read like love letters to efficiency and innovation. Yet every time a position opened up, there was always a reason why it wasn't quite my time. Too young, too specialized, too something. But this time was different. This time, I had the project that would change everything. The Customer Data Platform Initiative was my baby from conception. I'd noticed how our clients struggled to integrate their customer information across different systems, creating silos that cost them time and money. My solution wasn't just a Band-Aid, it was a complete reimagining of how mid-sized companies could compete with tech giants in understanding their customers. It was elegant, scalable, and would position Westbridge as an industry leader. For 3 months, I'd lived and breathed that project. Weekends disappeared into PowerPoints and code reviews. I'd assembled a team, managed resources, navigated the political landmines of interdepartmental cooperation. When other departments pushed back, I found ways to bring them on board. When the budget got tight, I figured out creative solutions. This wasn't just work, this was my masterpiece. The promotion was practically guaranteed. HR had already started paperwork. My colleagues had begun that subtle shift in how they treated me, that unconscious deference to upcoming authority. I'd even started looking at furniture for the corner office, mentally arranging where my desk would go, where I'd hang my degrees. 7 years of 80-hour weeks, missed birthdays, postponed vacations. All of it was about to pay off. I could taste it, that moment when everything I'd sacrificed would finally make sense. I should have been paying attention to the shadows. Michael Hawthorne was the kind of man who wore his success like an expensive suit, tailored, imposing, and impossible to ignore. At 45, he'd been my department head for 3 years, though he'd been with Westbridge for nearly a decade. Silver streaks at his temples gave him that distinguished look that corporate boards ate up, and his handshake was firm enough to make you remember it, but not quite firm enough to seem trying too hard. On paper, Michael was everything a manager should be. Harvard MBA, check. Track record of successful product launches, check. The ability to speak in buzzwords and corporate jargon fluently enough to make C-suite executives nod along, double check. He had this way of entering a room that made everyone straighten their spines. And his laugh, a controlled, strategic sound, could diffuse tension or create it, depending on what served him best. But those of us in the trenches knew the truth. Michael Hawthorne was a master of strategic appropriation. He had this uncanny ability to be absent during the grinding work, but magnificently present when success was ready to be harvested. His contributions to projects were always vague enough to be unprovable, but specific enough to sound essential. "I provided strategic oversight" was his favorite phrase, which translated to, "I attended 2 meetings and sent 1 email." The first time I noticed his pattern was during the Morrison Industries account. Jennifer from business development had spent 6 months cultivating that relationship, only to watch Michael sweep in at the final presentation and position himself as the architect of the deal. Jennifer quit 2 months later. Then there was the supply chain optimization project that David in operations had pioneered. Somehow, in the final report to the board, David's name appeared once in the appendix while Michael's was featured 7 times in the executive summary. But I was different. I was smarter, more careful. I documented everything, sent confirmation emails, created paper trails. I thought I was protecting myself. Michael had been particularly interested in my customer data platform project from the beginning. "Fascinating approach. Claire," he'd say, appearing at my desk at odd hours, peering over my shoulder at spreadsheets and workflows. "Mind if I offer some guidance? I've seen similar initiatives at my previous companies." His guidance usually consisted of questions that I'd answer in detail, explaining my methodology, my reasoning, my innovations. He'd nod thoughtfully, occasionally making notes in that leather-bound portfolio he carried everywhere. "Brilliant," he'd murmur. "Simply brilliant. You're really onto something here." I actually felt flattered. Michael Hawthorne, the Michael Hawthorne, was taking interest in my work. He started inviting me to higher-level meetings, introducing me to senior management as one of our rising stars. He'd mention my project in passing to board members during golf outings, always giving me credit, always singing my praises. "Claire's initiative is going to revolutionize how we serve our clients," he'd say, and I'd beam with pride when it got back to me. The warning signs were there, but I was too intoxicated by the proximity to power to see them. The way he started scheduling alignment meetings about my project with stakeholders, meetings I wasn't invited to because I was too valuable to pull away from the actual work. How he volunteered to help polish my presentation for the board, insisting on seeing every slide, every data point, every strategic insight. The way he'd casually mention our project in emails to senior management. A linguistic shift so subtle I didn't catch it until it was too late. "You know, Claire," he said one afternoon, standing in my cubicle with that practiced casual lean against the partition. "This project is going to make someone's career, maybe multiple someone's." He smiled, that perfectly calibrated expression of mentorship mixed with authority. "I want to make sure you get everything you deserve from this." I thanked him, for looking out for me. I thought I'd found that rarest of creatures in corporate America, a boss who actually wanted to see his subordinates succeed. He'd even hinted that once I got my promotion, he had his eyes on a VP position, suggesting we'd continue working together at a higher level. "We make a good team," he'd said, and I'd agreed. The final presentation to the board was scheduled for Thursday, April 15th. I'd remember that date forever, burned into my memory like a brand. Michael suggested I send him the final deck Wednesday night so he could do one last review. Maybe add some executive-level context to strengthen the pitch. "You've done the hard work," he said, his hand briefly on my shoulder in that paternal way he'd perfected. "Let me help you package it for maximum impact. That's what good leaders do. They amplify their team's success." I sent him everything at 9:47 p.m. on Wednesday, April 14th. Every slide, every backup data sheet, every bit of research and innovation I'd poured my soul into for 3 months. I should have known that in the corporate jungle, the biggest predators often come disguised as mentors. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of perfect Chicago spring weather that should have been an omen. Too perfect, too bright, too full of promise. I arrived at the office at 7 a.m., 2 hours before the board presentation, wearing my best suit, the charcoal one I'd bought specifically for this moment. My hands were steady as I reviewed my notes one final time, practicing the transitions between slides, the emphasis on key points, the strategic pauses for effect. At 8:30, I headed to Michael's office to touch base before the meeting. His assistant, Patricia, looked up from her desk with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Oh, Claire," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone delivering news they didn't want to deliver. "Michael's already in the boardroom. The presentation got moved up to 8:15. The words didn't compute. Moved up? Nobody told me. He said he sent you an email last night." Patricia's eyes wouldn't meet mine. She'd been Michael's assistant for 5 years. She knew exactly what was happening. I actually ran, through the hallways in my heels, my portfolio clutched against my chest, my heart pounding with the kind of adrenaline that comes from knowing something terrible is happening, but not quite understanding what. The boardroom was at the end of the executive floor, its frosted glass walls revealing only shadows and shapes. I could hear Michael's voice through the door, confident, commanding, familiar. Revolutionary approach to customer data integration that will position Westbridge at the forefront of the industry. My hand froze on the door handle. Those were my words. My exact words from slide 3. I pushed open the door to find 12 board members seated around the polished conference table, their attention focused on the projection screen where my presentation, filled the wall. But it wasn't quite my presentation. The Westbridge logo was the same, the data was the same, but where my name had been on the title slide, it now read, "Presented by Michael Hawthorne, Director of Strategic Development," with a small line below, "With support from the Strategic Development team." Michael turned at my entrance, his expression a masterpiece of practiced surprise. "Claire, perfect timing. I was just telling the board about the exceptional support you provided on this initiative." Support? The word hit me like ice water. "I thought the presentation was at 9, I managed, my voice sounding thin and young in that room full of gray-haired authority. "I sent you an email about the time change," Michael said smoothly, his concern so perfectly pitched that I almost believed it myself. "Technology, right?" A few board members chuckled. "But you're here now. Please, have a seat." I was just walking through the implementation strategy. My implementation strategy. My months of 18-hour days. My innovation. I sat in the chair he indicated, along the wall, not at the table, and watched him present my work with the kind of polish that came from years of practice. He knew when to pause, when to smile, when to lean forward with enthusiasm. He fielded questions with my answers, cited my research as our findings, and walked through my algorithms as if he'd developed them himself. "This is extraordinary work, Michael," said Davidson, the board chair, his approval carrying the weight of carved stone. "How long have you been developing this?" 3 months of intensive development, Michael replied without missing a beat. "Though the conceptual framework has been percolating for much longer. It's been a labor of love, really." I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout that he was lying, that every line of code, every strategic insight, every innovation was mine. But I sat frozen, understanding with crystal clarity how perfectly I'd been played. Who would believe me? The junior employee who showed up late to the most important presentation of the year, claiming the department head had stolen her work? "And Claire here," Michael continued, gesturing toward me with benevolent acknowledgement. "Has been instrumental in data gathering and administrative support, one of our most dedicated team members." A few board members glanced my way with the kind of dismissive appreciation reserved for good secretaries and efficient assistants. Davidson nodded approvingly. Good to see you developing strong support staff. Michael, that's the mark of a true leader. The rest of the presentation blurred together. Michael announced projected revenue increases using my models, outlined the implementation timeline I'd developed, even used the client testimonials I'd gathered. When he reached the final slide, the one I'd designed to be my moment of triumph, he paused for effect. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't just a product, it's a paradigm shift, and I'm honored to lead Westbridge into this new era. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Davidson stood, others followed, and Michael basked in their approval with the practiced grace of someone who'd stolen enough victories to make it look natural. Outstanding work, Michael, Davidson said, shaking his hand firmly. This is exactly the kind of innovation we need. I think we need to discuss expanding your responsibilities. This VP position we've been considering, I think it's time. The room began to empty, board members congratulating Michael on their way out. And I remained frozen in my chair along the wall, invisible and irrelevant. Michael lingered, accepting handshakes and promises of golf games. Until finally, it was just the two of us. He walked over to where I sat, his expression shifting to something that might have been sympathy if it hadn't been so calculated. You did good work, Claire, he said quietly. Really good work. And I'll make sure you're recognized for your contribution. I'm recommending you for a senior specialist position. A nice raise, better benefits. You've earned it. He straightened his tie, gathered his portfolio, my portfolio of work, and headed for the door. At the threshold, he paused. The email about the time change must have gone to your spam folder. These things happen. But don't worry, your work, our work, is going to transform this company. You should be proud of what we've accomplished together. The door closed with a soft click, leaving me alone in the boardroom with the ghost of my presentation still glowing on the screen. Michael's name burning bright where mine should have been. The next 3 weeks were the darkest of my professional life. I moved through the office like a ghost, present but not really there, functioning but not really living. The senior specialist position Michael had mentioned, it materialized exactly as he'd promised, a $10,000 raise, a slightly better benefits package, and a new title that meant absolutely nothing. It was hush money, paid in corporate currency. I'd checked my email obsessively that first night, searching through spam, trash, every possible folder for the message Michael claimed to have sent about the time change. Nothing. Of course, there was nothing. He'd never sent it. The IT department could have pulled server logs to prove it, but who was going to request that? The newly promoted senior specialist against the newly minted vice president of strategic innovation. The congratulations were the worst part. Colleagues who knew, who had to know, that I'd led that project lined up to compliment Michael on his vision. Groundbreaking work, they said. Innovative approach. Game-changing strategy. Each compliment was a knife, and I collected them all, bleeding quietly in my ergonomic chair while maintaining the professional smile that corporate survival demanded. You should be happy, said Rachel from accounting, perching on my desk one afternoon. A promotion is a promotion. Besides, everyone knows you were part of the team. That's how you build a career, one step at a time. Part of the team, support staff, administrative assistants, that's what 3 months of innovation had been reduced to, a footnote in Michael Hawthorne's success story. I started calling in sick, something I'd never done in 7 years. Not fake sick, but genuinely ill from the stress of walking into that building every day. My stomach churned at the thought of seeing Michael's name on the VP door. My hands shook when I had to attend meetings where he presented his platform updates. I lost 12 pounds in 2 weeks, not from dieting, but from the complete inability to keep food down. The worst moment came during the company all-hands meeting. Davidson himself presented Michael with the VP announcement, calling him the kind of innovative leader Westbridge needs for the future. The entire company applauded while Michael stood at the podium, humble and gracious, mentioning his incredible team without naming names. I stood in the back, clapping with everyone else because not clapping would have been noticed, and watched my future get handed to the man who'd stolen it. That night, I sat in my Lincoln Park apartment, staring at my laptop screen, My resignation letter was half written, cursor blinking after. It is with regret that I. What? Submit my resignation, announce my departure, admit defeat. I'd started drinking wine at 6 p.m. By 9 p.m., the bottle was empty. And I was scrolling through LinkedIn, looking at other companies, other cities, other lives I could disappear into. Start over. Begin again. Pretend this never happened. My phone buzzed. A text from my mom. How did the big presentation go, sweetheart? I've been thinking about you all week. I stared at the message for 20 minutes, unable to formulate a response that wouldn't be a lie or wouldn't break me completely to type. Finally, I wrote. It went exactly as expected. The irony was that I'd been prepared for failure. I'd been prepared for the board to hate my idea, to think it was too ambitious or too risky or too expensive. I'd been prepared for honest rejection. What I hadn't been prepared for was theft, for the complete erasure of my contribution, for the casual way Michael had rewritten history with me sitting right there, powerless to correct the record. I found myself doing the math obsessively. 7 years at Westbridge. 2,555 days. Approximately 20,240 hours. Assuming an average of 8 hours per day. Though it had been so much more. All of it leading to this moment of profound humiliation. I calculated what I'd earned per hour of actual work. What each weekend had cost me. What each missed birthday dinner with friends had been worth. The number was pathetically small. You look like hell, Karen from HR said, stopping by my desk one morning. She said it kindly, with genuine concern, which somehow made it worse. Just tired, I replied. The standard corporate excuse for everything from exhaustion to existential crisis. You know, we have counseling services available through the Employee Assistance Program, she offered carefully. Sometimes it helps to talk to someone. A therapist. That's what my career had come to, needing professional help to process being professionally destroyed. But the emptiness was worse than the anger. I'd walk through the office feeling disconnected from my own body, watching myself perform tasks, answering emails, attending meetings, filing reports as if from a great distance. This wasn't my life. This couldn't be my life. I was supposed to be running the department by now, implementing my vision, building something that mattered. Instead, I was a cautionary tale whispered about in break rooms. Did you hear what happened to Claire? Michael totally screwed her over. But what can you do? That's corporate life. What can you do? The question echoed in my head during every sleepless night, every hollow day, every moment I caught sight of Michael's confident stride through the office. What can you do when the system is designed to protect the Michael Hawthorns of the world? When success isn't about merit, but about who's willing to be the most ruthless? I had 2 options, really. I could leave, quit, find another job, start over somewhere else, and hope the next Michael Hawthorne wouldn't find me. Or I could stay and accept my place in the corporate food chain, a perpetual contributor to other people's success stories. But, late one night, staring at my ceiling at 3 a.m., a third option began to take shape. It was crazy, probably impossible, definitely dangerous to my career if it failed. But the thought of it, the mere possibility, was the first thing that had made me feel alive since that Thursday morning in April. What if I didn't quit? What if I didn't accept it? What if, instead, I learned to play Michael's game better than he did? The thought was intoxicating. And for the first time in 3 weeks, I smiled. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It began with a simple realization at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Michael Hawthorne wasn't special. He wasn't smarter or more talented or more deserving. He was just better at the game. And games, I'd learned from years of strategic analysis, could be studied, understood, and won. I started by documenting everything, not just my work, I'd learned that lesson too late, but Michael's patterns. I created a spreadsheet, encrypted and backed up in 3 different cloud services, tracking every project he'd claimed, every person he'd stepped on, every lie he'd told so smoothly it became accepted truth. The data revealed something fascinating. Michael had a formula. He targeted high-visibility projects led by subordinates isolated from upper management. He inserted himself gradually, always helpful, always supportive, until the lines of ownership blurred. Then, he struck. Jennifer from business development, David from operations. Me. We were all the same profile, talented, dedicated, and naive enough to believe hard work spoke for itself. But there were others, too. Names I found by digging through old email chains and departure announcements. Sarah Martinez, who'd left 2 years ago after her marketing automation system became Michael's crown jewel. Thomas Park, whose predictive analytics model now graced Michael's executive bio as his signature achievement. I reached out to Sarah first. We met at a coffee shop in Wicker Park. Far from the loop, far from any chance of Westbridge eyes. "Claire Donovan," she said, studying me over her cappuccino. "I heard about what happened with the data platform. Classic Michael." "How did you handle it?" I asked. She laughed, bitter and knowing. "I didn't. I left. Took a job in Seattle, started over. It's what everyone does." "What if someone didn't?" I pressed. "What if someone fought back?" Sarah set down her cup carefully. "You know what Michael's superpower is? It's not stealing ideas. It's making sure that anyone who challenges him looks petty, jealous, unable to be a team player. He's got 10 years of relationships at that company. You've got what? 7? You can't win." But she was wrong about one thing. I didn't need to win by playing defense. I needed to play offense. I started building my network differently. Not the obvious power players, Michael had those locked down. But the invisible infrastructure of Westbridge, the IT specialists who controlled access to systems, the administrative assistants who scheduled the meetings that mattered, the night cleaning crew who saw which offices stayed lit late and which documents got shredded after hours. Patricia, Michael's assistant, was the key. She'd been booking his victories and covering his tracks for 5 years. But I'd noticed something. She was tired. The constant demands, the lack of recognition, the way Michael treated her like furniture that could type. I started bringing her coffee, good coffee, from the boutique place 2 blocks over, not the break room swill. Small conversations turned into longer ones. "You know," she said one afternoon, voice low, "he doesn't even remember my kids' names. 5 years, and he still calls them your boys when they're boy and girl twins." Every grievance was a thread, and I began weaving them together. Meanwhile, I studied Michael's weaknesses with academic precision. His technical knowledge was surface level, gleaned from executive summaries and TED Talks. He could present brilliantly, but couldn't answer deep dive questions without deflecting. He relied entirely on his team for actual innovation, but had burned through so much talent that his bench was getting thin. Most importantly, I discovered his financial vulnerabilities. Michael lived beyond his means. The Porsche, the Gold Coast penthouse, the expensive divorce from 3 years ago that Patricia mentioned he was still paying for. He needed his VP salary, needed the bonuses, needed the stock options. He couldn't afford to fail. I also found allies in unexpected places. Jennifer, who'd lost the Morrison Industries account to Michael, hadn't left the company as I'd thought. She'd transferred to the New York office but still had access to our systems. David from operations was still around, promoted to a lateral position that kept him quiet but not satisfied. Even Thomas Park, though he'd left Westbridge, had stayed in Chicago and was more than willing to share his documentation over drinks. "I kept everything," Thomas told me, sliding a flash drive across the table. "Every email, every original file, every timestamp showing when I created the work versus when Michael accessed it. I thought about using it, but one person's word against his isn't enough." I finished. "Exactly. But multiple people, with documented patterns, with evidence." He trailed off, letting the possibility hang between us. The plan that emerged wasn't about destroying Michael. That would be too obvious, too traceable to motive. It was about letting him destroy himself. I'd learned from the master. After all, the best theft was the kind where the victim handed you everything willingly. I started working on something new, something bigger than the data platform. something Michael wouldn't be able to resist. But this time, I wouldn't be the naive contributor hoping for recognition. This time, I'd be the architect of his downfall. Late nights in the office took on new meaning. I wasn't just working, I was preparing a battlefield. Every line of code, every strategic document, every innovation was both bait and trap. I documented everything in ways Michael would never think to check. Metadata in files, hidden tabs in spreadsheets, digital watermarks in presentations that would survive any reformatting. But the masterstroke was simpler than all of that. Patricia, exhausted from another weekend of managing Michael's urgent demands, had given me something invaluable: access to his calendar. Not officially, of course, but she'd started accidentally forwarding me meeting invites meant for him, then apologizing profusely while mentioning, "Oh, but since you're already invited, you might as well attend if you're free." 3 months after my humiliation in the boardroom, I was ready. I had my allies, my evidence, and most importantly, my trap. Michael thought he'd broken me, turned me into another corporate casualty who'd accept their place in the hierarchy. He had no idea that I'd spent those months in the darkness learning to see. And what I saw was his end, approaching with the inevitability of a Chicago winter. The game was about to begin. And this time, I knew all his moves before he made them. The project I dangled in front of Michael was called PRISM, Predictive Resource Intelligence System Management. It was ambitious enough to catch his attention, technical enough that he couldn't fully understand it, and perfectly timed with Westbridge's push into AI-driven solutions. I pitched it casually in a department meeting, almost as an afterthought. "I've been exploring something in my spare time," I said, pulling up a single slide. "Early stages, but the preliminary algorithms show a 40% improvement in resource allocation efficiency." Michael's eyes sharpened like a hawk spotting prey. "Interesting concept. Claire, why don't you send me what you have? I'd love to provide some strategic guidance." "Of course," I replied, maintaining the eager subordinate mask I'd perfected. "I'll forward the overview deck." But this time was different. The deck I sent him was crafted with surgical precision, impressive enough to whet his appetite, but incomplete enough to be useless without me. Critical algorithms were referenced but not included. Data sources were mentioned but not documented. It was a beautiful skeleton without organs, muscles, or breath. Within days, Michael was circling. "This PRISM project has potential," he said, stopping by my desk with that practiced casual lean. "I think we should develop it together. I can handle the executive stakeholder management while you focus on the technical execution." "That would be amazing," I gushed, playing the grateful subordinate. "Your experience would be invaluable." I began feeding him information in carefully measured doses. Each update was designed to make him feel in control while keeping him dependent on my continued involvement. Meanwhile, I was building the real PRISM in parallel. A complete, documented, revolutionary system that only I had access to. Patricia proved invaluable. She'd schedule Michael's PRISM strategy sessions with board members, always at times when I was supposedly unavailable. "Claire's deep in development," she'd explain, "but Mr. Hawthorne can brief you on the strategic vision." These meetings forced Michael to present ideas he didn't fully understand, making promises based on my carefully crafted half-truths. The beauty was watching him commit publicly to deliverables he couldn't deliver without me. He promised Davidson a working prototype by quarter end. He told the technology committee about features I'd invented but never shared. He was building a house of cards with my phantom blueprints, and every promise was another card stacked precariously higher. Jennifer played her part perfectly from New York, sending carefully timed emails about hearing exciting things about Michael's new project and asking technical questions he couldn't answer without forwarding to me. David created integration requirements from the operations side that would require deep technical knowledge to address. Even Thomas, from outside the company, sent a LinkedIn message that Michael saw, congratulating him on revolutionizing predictive analytics and asking about specific methodologies that Michael had to deflect. 6 weeks into the trap, Michael was fully committed. He'd presented PRISM to the board as his vision for Westbridge's future, He'd allocated budget, assigned resources, and even hired 2 consultants to support his initiative. The entire leadership team was watching, waiting for the VP of Strategic Innovation to deliver his next miracle. That's when I made my move. "Michael," I said, knocking on his door one Thursday afternoon. "We need to talk about Prism." "Come in," he said, barely looking up from his screen. "Is the prototype ready for Monday's demo?" "That's what I wanted to discuss." I closed the door behind me. "I've been doing some thinking about my career path here at Westbridge." Now he looked up, a flicker of concern crossing his features. "You're happy with your senior specialist role, aren't you?" The raise was substantial. "Oh, absolutely," I said, sitting down uninvited. "But I feel like my contributions to Prism warrant something more. Perhaps a co-lead credit on the project? Joint presentation to the board." His face hardened into the expression I'd been expecting, the one that said he was about to explain reality to a naive subordinate. "Claire, we've discussed this. You're a valuable contributor. But executive presentation requires a certain level of experience, a certain gravitas that comes with time. You're not ready for that visibility." "I understand," I said, standing up. "Then I'm afraid I need to recuse myself from Prism due to other commitments. I'm sure you can handle the remaining development and Monday's demonstration yourself." The color drained from his face. "You can't be serious. The demo is in 4 days." "I'm sure someone with your experience and gravitas can handle it," I said, heading for the door. "After all, it's your vision, your project. I was just providing support." "Claire, wait." "Oh," I added, pausing at the threshold. "I should mention that I've been documenting all my work on Prism extensively. Every algorithm, every data model, every innovation, all time-stamped and registered with legal as my intellectual property. Just following your excellent example of protecting one's contributions." I left him sitting there, his mouth slightly open, his kingdom of stolen ideas suddenly built on sand. But I wasn't done. That evening, I sent an email to the entire Prism project team, copying Patricia by accident, withdrawing from the project due to unexpected workload priorities, and wishing Michael the best with his innovative vision. I attached a final status report that detailed every technical component I'd developed. Components Michael didn't understand and couldn't replicate. Then I waited. 4 days. 4 days for Michael Hawthorne to realize that he'd promised something he couldn't deliver, that he'd built his reputation on knowledge he didn't possess, that he'd climbed so high on other people's work that he'd forgotten he couldn't actually fly. Monday's demo was approaching like a freight train, and Michael was tied to the tracks with ropes he'd woven himself. The best part? Everyone would be watching. Davidson, the board, the entire leadership team, all waiting to see the next miracle from the VP of Strategic Innovation. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully, dreaming of the beautiful symphony of a reputation collapsing in real time. Monday arrived wrapped in gray clouds and the promise of rain. Pathetic fallacy at its finest. I arrived early, positioning myself in the third-floor conference room that overlooked the main boardroom. From there, I could watch the executives arrive without being seen. Davidson came first, followed by the technology committee, then the CFO with her perpetual expression of skepticism. They filed in like judges to a trial, unaware they were about to witness an execution. At 9:55, Michael arrived. Even from a distance, I could see the sheen of sweat on his forehead. The way his usual confident stride had shortened into something more tentative. He carried his leather portfolio and a laptop bag. But I knew what wasn't in those bags: a working prototype, a coherent presentation, or any understanding of what he'd promised to deliver. Patricia had done her job perfectly. The previous Friday, she'd sent me the wrong meeting link, the one that would let me observe the presentation remotely without appearing on the participant list. Oops, her message had said, followed by a winking emoji she'd never use in official communication. At exactly 10:00, I opened my laptop and logged in to watch Michael Hawthorne destroy himself. "Good morning, everyone," Michael began, his voice carrying that artificial confidence I'd once mistaken for competence. "Today, I'm excited to demonstrate Prism, our revolutionary predictive resource intelligence system. He clicked to his first slide, my slide, actually, from the deck I'd sent him weeks ago. But without the underlying understanding, it was just pretty graphics and meaningless buzzwords. As you can see, he continued, Prism utilizes advanced machine learning algorithms to optimize resource allocation across multiple vectors. Can you elaborate on these algorithms? Asked Sandra Chen, the CFO. What specific methodologies are you employing? Michael's pause was barely perceptible, but I caught it. We're using a proprietary blend of neural network architectures and decision tree frameworks, he said, stringing together terms he'd Googled that morning. Interesting, Davidson interjected. Let's see the prototype. This was the moment. Michael clicked to switch to the demo, and nothing happened. He clicked again. Still nothing. Just a moment, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Technical difficulties. But there were no technical difficulties. There was simply no prototype. I'd built components, shown him pieces, but never gave him anything that could actually run. He'd been so confident in his ability to steal my work that he'd never verified he actually had it. While Michael sorts that out, Jennifer said, dialing in from New York as planned. I have a question about the data integration architecture. How does Prism handle real-time synchronization across distributed databases? Michael looked like a deer in headlights. That's a detailed technical specification that my team handles. Your team. Davidson's voice had shifted from interested to concerned. Who exactly is on this team? Claire Donovan has been contributing. Claire withdrew from the project last week, Sandra interrupted, pulling up my email on her tablet. She cited workload conflicts. So who's actually building this? The room fell silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. Michael stood at the front, his kingdom crumbling in real time. Perhaps, suggested Robert from the technology committee, you could walk us through the code architecture, show us the repository. The code it's proprietary, confidential. Michael. Davidson's voice had turned cold. We allocated $2 million to this project based on your assurances. Are you telling me you can't demonstrate a working prototype or even show us the underlying code? That's when David played his card. Mr. Davidson, if I may, he said, standing up. I've been trying to integrate Prism with our operations systems as requested, but Mr. Hawthorne hasn't been able to provide any technical documentation. In fact, every technical question I've asked has been deflected or ignored. That's not... Michael started. I have the email threads. David continued, his tablet already out. 17 requests for technical specifications. 0 substantive responses. The boardroom had become a feeding frenzy, and Michael was the chum in the water. Mr. Hawthorne. Davidson stood, his authority filling the room. Do you actually understand the technical aspects of what you've been promising us? Michael's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. His carefully constructed image of executive competence was dissolving, leaving behind the truth. A man who'd built his career on theft and couldn't deliver when the theft was no longer possible. I need Claire, he finally admitted. The words pulled from him like teeth. She developed the technical components. I provided strategic oversight, but you presented this as your innovation. Sandra interrupted. You stood here 6 weeks ago and called it your vision for Westbridge's future. Patricia chose that moment to knock and enter, carrying a folder. Mr. Davidson, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it flagged something you should see. They've been investigating some unusual access patterns in our systems. She handed him the folder, the one I'd helped prepare, documenting every instance of Michael accessing other people's work files, downloading their presentations, modifying their documents, Sarah's marketing automation system, Thomas's predictive analytics, my customer data platform. All time-stamped, all traceable, all damning. Davidson flipped through the pages, his expression darkening with each revelation. Michael, these documents suggest a pattern of appropriating other employees' work. Is this accurate? The room waited. Michael stood alone at the front. No allies, no stolen ammunition, no escape route. He'd spent so many years taking credit that he'd forgotten what it felt like to actually own failure. "I think," Davidson said slowly, "we need to discuss your future at Westbridge. Privately, now." As they filed out, Michael following Davidson like a condemned man to the gallows, Jennifer's voice came through the speaker. "Should I end the call?" "Please do," Sandra replied, then added, "And Jennifer, excellent timing on those questions." The screen went dark, but I remained in my third-floor perch, watching Michael's career die with the same attention he'd given to killing mine. The difference was, I'd orchestrated his downfall with precision, documentation, and irrefutable evidence. By noon, the email would go out. By end of day, Michael Hawthorne would be clearing out his executive office, and by tomorrow, Westbridge would need someone who actually understood PRISM to salvage the project and the $2 million already invested. I closed my laptop and straightened my suit, the same charcoal one I'd worn to my humiliation, now worn to his funeral. The rain had started, streaking the windows with paths that looked like tears. But I wasn't crying. I was ready for my resurrection. The email arrived at 3:47 p.m. Not the company-wide announcement of Michael's departure that had gone out at noon with the usual corporate euphemisms about pursuing other opportunities and grateful for his contributions. This email was different. It was from Davidson himself, marked confidential, requesting my presence in the boardroom at 4 Cisarg. I walked through the office with measured steps, aware of the eyes following me. Word had spread like wildfire through the corporate gossip channels. Michael was gone. The PRISM project was in shambles, and somehow, everyone knew I was at the center of it all. Davidson sat alone at the head of the conference table, the same spot where Michael had presented my work 6 months ago. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the polished wood. "Claire," he said, gesturing to a chair, at the table this time, not along the wall. "I believe we need to have an honest conversation." I sat down, maintaining eye contact, saying nothing. I'd learned the power of silence in these rooms. The investigation into Michael's conduct revealed systematic appropriation of intellectual property spanning 5 years. Davidson continued. "Your customer data platform was just the latest in a long pattern. We owe you an apology." An apology. As if words could restore the months of humiliation, the sleepless nights, the career momentum I'd lost. "I don't want an apology," I said quietly. "I want what I earned." Davidson nodded slowly. "The PRISM project, $2 million allocated, significant board interest, and according to our technical review, you're the only person who actually understands it." "That's correct. We need someone to take over Michael's responsibilities immediately. The VP position, the team, the strategic initiatives. The board has concerns about your experience level, but given the circumstances..." He trailed off, waiting for me to make it easy for him, to grasp eagerly at whatever crumbs they offered. But I'd learned to play this game now. "I'll take the position," I said. "With Michael's salary plus 20%, his full benefits package, and a written guarantee that all innovations I develop remain credited to me. I also want Sarah Martinez and Thomas Park offered positions to return, should they choose, reporting directly to me." Davidson's eyebrows rose. "That's quite a list of demands." "They're not demands. They're terms. Westbridge has 2 choices. Accept them and salvage PRISM along with your reputation, or refuse and explain to the board why the $2 million project failed and why the person who could save it walked away." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Finally, Davidson smiled, a real smile, not the corporate version. "You know, Claire, I think you're going to do very well here. Very well indeed." The contract was signed by end of day. The announcement went out the next morning. Claire Donovan, Vice President of Strategic Innovation, the youngest VP in Westbridge history, the email noted, promoted in recognition of exceptional innovation and leadership. My new office was Michael's old office, but I had it completely renovated. New furniture, new layout, new everything. The only thing I kept was the view. 14 floors up, overlooking the city that had watched me fall and rise again. Patricia knocked on my door that first morning, carrying coffee from the boutique place 2 blocks over. "Congratulations, Ms. Donovan," she said, then paused. "I suppose I should ask, are you keeping me on?" "Are you kidding?" I replied. "You're getting a 30% raise and the title of Executive Strategic Coordinator. I need someone I can trust." Her smile was worth more than any corporate victory. Sarah Martinez came back, taking over customer experience innovation. Thomas Park returned too, heading up predictive analytics. Jennifer transferred from New York to lead business development. David got the operations integration role he'd always deserved. We built a team of people who'd been overlooked, underestimated, and undervalued. Within 6 months, our division had the highest performance metrics in the company. The Prism project launched 3 months later, on schedule and under budget. It revolutionized how Westbridge served its clients. Exactly as I'd envisioned in those late nights when it was just me and an idea that someone else tried to steal. The industry press called it groundbreaking. Davidson called it vindication. I called it justice. But the sweetest moment came later. Almost a year after that April morning, when everything fell apart, I was at a conference in San Francisco, presenting Prism to a room of 500 industry leaders. Afterward, during the networking reception, I spotted a familiar figure at the bar. Michael Hawthorne, wearing a name tag from a small startup no one had heard of. Our eyes met across the room. He looked older, diminished, his expensive suit replaced with something off the rack. He started to approach, then thought better of it, turning away to disappear into the crowd. I could have felt triumph in that moment, could have savored his downfall, relished in the reversal of our fortunes, but standing there, successful and vindicated, I realized I felt nothing for him at all. He was just another cautionary tale in the corporate world, a reminder that stealing someone else's light doesn't make you bright. It just reveals your darkness when the theft is exposed. I turned back to the group of executives eager to hear about Prism, about innovation, about building something real instead of stealing something fake. My phone buzzed with a text from my team back in Chicago. "Killed it at the quarterly review. Davidson says we're the future of Westbridge." The future. It had a nice ring to it. I thought back to that night in my Lincoln Park apartment, wine drunk and defeated, cursor blinking after, "It is with regret that I..." Now I knew how that sentence should have ended. It is with regret that I ever doubted what I was capable of when I stopped being a victim and started being a strategist. The corner office, the title, the recognition. They were all satisfying. But the real victory was simpler than that. Every morning, I sat in Michael's old chair, in Michael's old office, living the life he'd tried to steal from me. And I knew one absolute truth. The sweetest revenge isn't just getting even. It's getting everything. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about justice in the workplace. Have you ever faced a similar situation? How did you handle it? Let's discuss in the comments.